My name's Michael. I'm the data strategist here at Launch. Launch, of course, we're primarily a paid media agency, dabbling in some other things as well, all in the name of getting our clients the absolute maximum best results from their paid media activity. And Phil is definitely right. Obsessed is definitely the word. But yeah, today I am here with my brand new presentation. And would you believe this is my first presentation as like a real adult, like a real man for the first time. And it's not because I've just become a husband. And it's not because I've just become a homeowner as well. And it's not even because I've finally built a 5-screen setup of my dreams. It's actually because I'm now the proud owner of my very own pressure washer, and I can clean my patio, make it nice and shiny, and not have to give it back to anyone at the end of the day. But that's me just showing off now, and this has absolutely nothing to do with my talk. My talk today, I've lovingly entitled GA4 and Google Ads, Pedigree Chums, with an S on the end, not just for copyright reasons. So if anyone watching is from Mars Incorporated, I'm afraid you can't sue me. The actual reason I did that is for reasons that will shortly be revealed. And just like a play, my talk today is going to be in 3 acts. Will it be a tragedy or a comedy? Well, hopefully we'll be able to determine that very shortly. So, put it this way. Mr. T once said, you should treat your mother right. And the same can be said about smart bidding in Google Ads. And, well, I mean, despite there being still some resistance in this day and age, smart bidding's not really a new thing, but this comment here was from the chat in one of Google's webinars the other day. It seems very apparent that there's still a group of people that manage accounts that really aren't on board with smart bidding. And I mean, that's not me having a go. That's, you know, I think I can actually sympathize with that. And I think that's typically because Google likes to share results, but not really techniques or philosophies behind all the features that they bring out. I've actually got my own philosophy for smart bidding and using smart bidding to its maximum potential. And I'm going to do my very best to share that with you comprehensively today. In fact, it's something I've talked about before in a previous talk. If anyone saw my talk at MeasureFest during lockdown, I'm sorry, I'm going to be talking about dogs again. But most likely you didn't see that talk. So I'm going to try and get you up to speed really quickly and then go from there. So basically, if you treat smart bidding like a robot, then it's going to behave like a robot. Data in, data out, nothing special. But instead, if you think about your smart bidding like an animal, you are likely going to get a better result from it. So for example, if you kept a dog locked up in a garage with nothing to do except eat junk food, if you then go into the garage one day and ask the dog to fetch you a ball, well, it's probably just going to make like a sad, pathetic cough noise and probably keel over, which definitely isn't a great life for the dog. And as the pet owner, not great for you either. But then by contrast, if your dog is allowed to roam free and you know, have fun, given high quality food, given toys and books to stimulate its mind, when you ask that dog to fetch you a ball, the results would be very clear. You'll have a happy dog and you'll be a happy owner, especially if you want lots of tennis balls, which of course in this metaphor represents conversions, and the food and the toys represent good, clean, robust data. So all of that sounds very simple, but it's often not applied in practice, and it's something we see all the time with the paid media clients that we onboard. And this slide, just to let you know, that doesn't mean shoot your customers, because I hear that's bad for business. But let's say that the smart bidding solutions of Google Ads are like a dog with a sniper rifle. When you combine Google Ads with the machine learning of GA4, it's like you're adding a second helper dog, spotting the next target with a telescope to help out your sniper dog. And well, I guess, unfortunately for everyone involved, to me, this is the absolute best metaphor for representing the power of combining these two Google forces. So how do we achieve this? So step 1, go into the GA4 property settings, down to product links, and then go to Google Ads links. You then choose the account you wish to link, have a look at the settings which follow, and then hit save. And that's the end of my talk, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for watching. No, sorry, that's a stupid joke. But because GA4 is new, there is a mix of good and bad guides out there. And I'm finding a lot of guides around GA4 do leave a lot to be desired, such as, that little prank I just played there. But no, the actual strategy goes deeper. And it's not just about simply sharing data between two platforms. The approach and the results that are generated actually comes more of a trifecta. So it's about what you can learn from the data you're capturing, but then based on that data, what you can action off the back of that to improve the results from your paid media activity, but also at the same time, what you can be teaching your machine learning solutions, what you can be teaching your dogs, basically. So in order to do this most effectively, you've got some foundations to lay. So first off, you want to empower your GA4 property. So starting with the most simple, granular location and device data and ads personalization. I believe they're turned on by default, but you might want to check that. Certainly, if you're eligible to use those features, then you'll want those very much toggled on because they will pass through some important things over to Google Ads when you link the two. Also, just like you would with universal analytics, think about your custom definitions, so your custom dimensions and metrics. And it's something I've always said. Why settle for what Google Analytics does out of the box? Why not tailor that to your exact needs, give you exact insights about your business specifically? It's all very good knowing how many referrals you got last month, but let's have a look at users, what subscription tier they're on, what product or service they're most interested in, what types of content are they engaging in. And the very same rings true for GA4, of course. Google Consent Mode, if you are running a cookie management platform on your website, and I really hope that you are. Of course, people opting out of being tracked by cookies are going to be lost in the darkness, the ether, unless you have Google Consent Mode capturing basic information about them via cookieless means, and also helping with some of that machine learning modeling that goes on in the background for you. And then probably most importantly, and certainly of increasing importance, is enabling Google Signals, which is something that Google are really focusing on at the moment. And the reason I say it's important is before you toggle that switch in your property settings, you need to make sure that you meet the policy requirements, or your website's privacy policy meets those requirements, because it's a bit of a sticking point, bit of a dodgy legal situation potentially. And the reason you want to do this for Google Ads is because all of these powerful machine learning features and audiences within GA4 can't be passed along to Google Ads until Google Signals and the advertising features, the personalization features, are enabled. So one to watch out for, not often shared in articles such as this. The policy requirements as well, if you feel like your privacy policy isn't up to scratch, there's lots of text on the page, but it's not very straightforward. So as an agency, we tend to exercise due diligence. We ask our clients to confirm that they are happy with the terms and that they are happy with their privacy policy. And if in doubt, there are companies out there that do specialize in this sort of thing. So if in doubt, reach out, I suppose. Sadly, we can't do it. We do a lot of things, but we're not legal experts. So unfortunately, that's the case. So once GA4 is all set up and ready, you then have a bit of work to do over on Google Ads as well. So as we say, link GA4, of course. Google Consent Mode also plays its part on the Google Ads side of things too. In a similar vein, if you are indeed running a cookie management platform, by adding enhanced conversions, which will pass through in a secure way, user account details such as their email address, their postage address, their telephone number, to Google. So if they are signed into their Google account, either via Google Chrome or YouTube, say, it will add extra context to those cookieless hits. And that, again, all helps the modeling, all expands the learnings that you send to your dogs. And something that we find as well when onboarding clients is the use of portfolio bidding. If you can group similar campaigns, not only campaign types, but campaign themes, behaviors into a portfolio, the amount of learnings and the eventual results you get from those bidding strategies is a lot more powerful. So use wherever you can, wherever applicable. On the subject, what you don't want to do when you make a portfolio grouping or a grouping of campaigns to share learnings, you don't really want to cross the streams. So it could be something as simple as putting two portfolio bidding strategies in the same shared budget. Much like two dogs fighting over toys, there might be a bit of conflict between them. So what you want to do, very simply in this example, is to give a shared budget per portfolio strategy. So two clear groupings, no fights outside, everything's hunky-dory. Also, not just localized to Google Ads or localized to your analytics platforms, you want to make sure that your tracking is all singing off the same hymn sheet. Of course, with Universal Analytics, there are various different options on how you track an interaction of importance or a conversion, for a better term. Same with Google Ads and same with GA4. What you want to make sure is that if you're tracking the same action across all the platforms, that it's firing at the same point and it's being measured in the same way. The discrepancies between the platforms is, notable as it is. So if you want to add, you don't want to add further discrepancies to make all your results a wonky mess. For those of us like us that like to house everything within Google Tag Manager, and it sounds like from the other talks today, there are plenty of us about, it could be as simple as changing triggers within so that any tracking for all your platforms that represents the same action simply uses the same trigger logic in order to fire. Here's an example of where that could go wrong. If you've got two of the three platforms using the same trigger, but then the third one using a different one. And again, you have to consider the deduplication features of each platform too. For instance, for a Google Ads conversion, if it's a purchase, an e-commerce purchase, you pop that transaction ID into the tag. For any reason, if that tag should fire twice by mistake, it will know it's the same interaction and it will remove the second instance. Whereas if you don't, it won't know that and you could see inflated data, which we don't like, of course, specifically when we're trying to teach some dogs how to fetch us some tennis balls. And by the way, when I make reference to Google Tag Manager, I don't mean the server-side version. I'm very much still client-side. The rest of the team here have been looking at server-side this year. And in fact, my New Year's resolution is to do the same, get very adept with it. And because I'm a bit of a silly sausage or dedicated to the cause, depending how you want to look at it, I imagine I'll probably start as soon as the firework display finishes. And likely, my first port of call will be going to the great YouTube channel that is run by our hosts at MeasureMinds. So again, once we've linked GA4 and Google Ads, we've activated signals if we can, and ads personalization if we can, checking our privacy policy, making sure all checks out, and then we've laid our foundations for success in both platforms. Then it's time to get to work. And then it is time for really getting your strategy off the ground and start getting those learnings into Google Ads, getting good meat and toys for your dogs to get your tennis balls to come flooding in. The first thing you want to look at is audiences. So here, representing the olden days of tracking and Universal Analytics in conjunction with Google Ads. Generally, you could make audiences within the platform of Google Ads with simple logic applying. And of course, I'm talking about remarketing audiences here, of course. So has the user visited a URL containing this, but not containing this? And then anything more complicated, anything more niche or tailored, you then create a segment in Universal Analytics and send it on through to Google Ads for use. But there's no use getting nostalgic because we're in the future now. But reassuringly, the approach is fairly similar. Google Ads remarketing audiences still has the same logic, but in like a really complicated way that gives me a bit of a headache now. I don't know if you've seen it recently, but there's loads of weird stuff going on in there. GA4 is fairly similar as well in terms of getting you some of those niche tailored audiences. But what really moves the strategy along is some of the machine learning powered magic. And this is where the spotter dog with the telescope really earns his stripes. So the one that everybody wants to get their hands on is predictive audiences. It's a bit of the star of the show when it comes to linking the two platforms. Primarily, I suppose, it is e-commerce focused, but there are benefits if you're doing a lead gen campaign as well. I've actually toyed with the idea of putting a false purchase event in for lead generation, conversions, and businesses, but I've never really got round to it. So feel free to experiment with that if you want to. So the reason why you'd want to use these is, like the name says, for their predictive qualities. If it can give you visibility of the users most likely to purchase soon, or even purchase for the first time, or even spend the most out of all the people that are likely to purchase soon, this can be very powerful when you apply it to a well-trained Google Ads smart bidding strategy. Similarly, it will identify users previously visited that are not likely to visit in the near future, or if they've purchased before but not likely to purchase again in the near future. You may want to run a separate re-engagement campaign. For instance, if it's people that bought in your last year's Black Friday sale and you'd like them to come back for this year's Black Friday sale, you might target them with very specific messaging about this year's Black Friday offers. And of course, these audiences can be combined with other factors, such as, locations, previous traffic sources, all the nice dimensions you get as part of the audiences suite anyway. However, something we found previously with our bigger e-commerce clients is once we set up their GA4, got all the e-commerce tracking sorted out as well, we'd be waiting and waiting and waiting for these predictive audiences to be eligible for use. And, as far as we could tell, we were meeting all of the thresholds set by Google, the specific ones and the vague ones probably as well. Speaking of Google support, they leaned heavily on the vague ones. So we just kept on waiting until we realized, and this again isn't something that gets shared much in articles of this nature, is that hidden away over in the account settings in Google Analytics, you actually have to enable the modeling contributions and business insights tick box, which might be something you did if you've been running analytics for many years now, but for new clients, new businesses, perhaps that sprung up over lockdown, this tick box you might find has not been ticked. So if in doubt, have a peek. Next up in the audiences list, if you like, is the lifetime value. And I keep calling this loan to value, but I've had way too much talk about mortgages this year. So if I let that slip, please excuse me. So lifetime value audiences, again, give you more valuable visibility, not just for yourself, but for your Google Ads machine learning system as well. Of when users did their first key interactions or when they last did some sort of activity of value on your website, and also the behaviors that they performed since they first became a user on your website or became a purchaser, got those lovely client and user ID cookies set in their browser. All of this is very powerful for marketers like myself and us here at Launch, because we're so used to looking at value in real time. We ran this campaign this month, this many people purchased, and this is how much revenue was generated. But now we can say, actually, across the year, not only did we get those purchases in that moment, but this customer has come back multiple times and made multiple purchases and spent even more than we realized previously. So it is brilliant for demonstrating the value of your ads activity. These audiences do work better, supposedly get a lot more accurate by integrating user ID with GA4, which was a feature of Universal Analytics, of course. But what we tend to find from clients is that there's a bit of a tricky hookup and usually involve developers wanting to charge a lot of money, which would mean it was deprioritized. However, depending on your site platform or your CRM, it could be easier than you think. Again, it's one of those question marks, all depends. Shopify, in fact, has a bit of an advantage, and I personally have been working a lot with Shopify tracking recently. It is a wonderful, horrible, but wonderful platform to work with. The advantage is it's got a global object for customer information that can be called upon for logged in users. So not only can you pull the user ID and pop it straight into the data layer, but it also comes with its own lifetime data variables you can populate as well, such as how many orders they've made and the total that they have spent since they've been a user. And of course, if they've been a user since you set up GA4, this is probably going to be a lot more accurate and provides you, an alternative source of logging your own lifetime value data. And of course, if you want to take this, pop it into GA4 as well. So you've got two measures working together. Why not send these as user properties and potentially on the login event, the recommended event of login, of course, and if you're getting a best practice setup for GA4 setup, you'll know that using recommended events where possible is definitely the way to go in terms of providing context to the GA4 machine learning system. That's better. On the subject of audiences, did you also know that you can use audiences in Google Ads to influence the overall conversion value? So basically, if you look at your customer base and you segment them by persona or behaviors, say, you can identify your most valuable users and your least valuable users. Bearing in mind that Google Ads' smart bidding will already do that on your behalf in terms of the information it can already gain. So demographic information and behavioral information, the different networks that they are interacting with. But if there's anything that it's not going to know out of the box or not going to know that's very tailored to your business, then you can provide it some additional information on that vein. So let's say we are a business running hand car washes, and people can go on our website, they can enter the make and model of their car, and it will give them a price, and then they can book to come down in an appointment slot and get their car washed, basically. Let's say when we analyze our customer data, we find out that people who own certain models of luxury cars are above and beyond much more likely to buy additional extras when they come down to the site on the day. Perhaps they'll pay extra for an air freshener that smells a lot better than the cheap one we buy in bulk from the pound shop. So let's say that actually, yeah, they are more valuable to the business and valuable in a way that's not immediately detectable through online activity. We could create an audience using the make and model of the car that they input when they book their appointment, and then we could turn that into an audience, and we can say, when this person converts, actually put a modifier on the normal base conversion value. So let's add something to it and teach our Google Ads smart bidding, our Google Ads dogs, that this type of person is more valuable. So go out and find some more of those. And on the subject of bidding, I'm sure you may already be aware that Google call value-based bidding smart bidding 2.0 because it's very important, not only because it adds additional context, so it doesn't bid too high or too low, depending on the value or anticipated value of the customer it's attracting, but also because it allows the smart bidding solutions to learn more. It gives additional context in order for it to make smarter decisions in real time. Relatively easy for e-commerce businesses, of course. You just take your transactional value, perhaps. But it's not so hard for those doing lead gen either. Simply a case of creating proxy values based on internal sales data and behavioral insights and working backwards from where the true monetary value is, moving along your macro all the way to the micro conversions and assigning values as such. And of course, keep making sure you keep those updated on a weekly, monthly basis, depending on how much that behavior changes. Because of course, it's highly likely, no matter what your business is, there's going to be some sort of seasonality there. However, of course, whether you're lead gen or e-com, the way we think about value is traditionally to do with revenue, but there is also another way. So in fact, you have a choice in your value-based bidding options. The main ones being, of course, the usual, the ROAS bidding, the revenue over ad spend or return on ad spend. People say it differently. I like to do it this way because it reminds me of the calculation I need to do to calculate that, because I will take any advantage going, especially this time in the month where I'm a little bit frazzled. But instead of using revenue, you can also use profit instead. So I can actually give you a very personal anecdote as to why you'd want to use POAS rather than ROAS. So back in a previous life, when I couldn't grow hair on my face, but a lot more on my head, I used to work in the consumer electronics industry. And we used to sell lots of flashy, brand new laptops, and we'd also try and sell cases for those laptops as well. If you look at these two products, well, it's obvious you want to sell more of the laptops because they are the most higher priced, highest value item. But then if you actually take a look at the profit margins on those, it was really low on laptops like that. They were, a high price from the supplier. There wasn't really much wiggle room there, so we only made a few quid on each one. Whereas the low value laptop bag, well, that was, it's cheap. It was from China. There was loads of money to be made there, so it made lots and lots of profit. So if we're focusing just on revenue, and when you consider the cost per click that you are logging to drive people to your website in the first place, if you're spending £12 per click to try and get people to buy the laptop, well, you're not going to get a very good return from that investment, of course. And when you put it this way, in simple terms, it's really easy to see why growing the business was so hard to achieve. Admittedly, of course, we don't currently have any clients here at launch that use POAS bidding right now. But before you throw the tomatoes at me and call me a big fat phony, I've done some simulations to demonstrate what can be done here. So there are third-party platforms that you can integrate and subscribe to that will handle the surfacing of profit margins to your website. You can also have a go at this yourself. And again, it's all going to depend on factors such as, how many products you sell and how the profit margins differ and how often they change, of course. It could be something as simple as doing a lookup on an item ID online, or maybe do something clever with the local storage keys or something. Maybe even set a custom field in your product catalog. I mean, there's lots of options, but most of them range from difficult to quite difficult. But if you can achieve that, of course, what you'd want to do, don't be foolish and replace revenue with profit. You want to run the two at the same time. And if you can run profit and revenue on all of the eligible e-commerce events, you can even track things like people that have added products to their basket but not yet returned to purchase them, that are going to be of high not only revenue value but profit value as well. But before you get carried away, if you can set this up and then pull this into GA4 as a custom metric, you can then plot revenue and profit together, and you can see the campaigns which are driving the most revenue versus profit. Are they the same? Are they very different? These are all things you want to determine before you start informing your smart bidding of what you should chase with regards to that. Of course, here you can see I've made it a custom metric. And interestingly, when you do custom metrics in GA4, it asks you if there's a unit of measurement involved, and currency being one of them. You can also specify where it relates to revenue or cost data. And I thought that would be for some sort of currency conversion feature, but actually I don't think it is. I think it's more for user access. So whether you give someone lesser permissions than yourself and you don't want to see revenue data or cost data about your business, which is quite handy. But mainly, it's reassuring that if you do set a custom metric that is based on revenue data, it won't affect the revenue count that you see in the monetization reports, which is very important. Of course, you want a snapshot of the revenue generated by your business. You don't want that to be inflated by any sort of experimental activity. And speaking of experimental, let's say, actually, you think POAS bidding is amazing. Let's switch to that right away. If you're going to do that, you have to consider the effect it's going to have on your dogs. So let's say yesterday we were doing ROAS bidding, and over the days, weeks, months, years even, that smart bidding solution has got really good at sniffing out high-value users that are going to spend the most. And it prides itself in finding more and more of those and generating a brilliant return for yourself on your ad spend. Now let's say that we replace conversion value from revenue to profit. And in my example of the laptop, of course, the next day, all of these high-value users that the dog has prided itself on finding, it's now going to think that its talent has just completely gone overnight. And of course, if you've got a sad dog, it leads to bad performance. And we've seen this happen to our own client accounts in many different ways over the years. So if you're going to switch such a significant thing about your bidding in a way like this, it's best to start from scratch. And of course, if you're starting from scratch with smart bidding, you have to also take into account the relearning phases of each. So even if you've run smart bidding for years, if you reset that back to day zero, it's going to take time to build up those learnings again. You're going to see that as a negative impact on your performance. It seems to differ between the bidding strategy types. And it's something I've studied because, again, silly sausage / dedicated to the course. And generally, I find that the learning phases are longer than what Google's recommendations are. The way I like to think of it is that any bidding strategy with a target applied, so previously target CPA or target ROAS, which is now an optional target you can apply to the maximize strategies, call them a target strategy. These probably, they're going to be a bit hesitant. If they were at a gig, they'd be at the bar and they'd be watching the band. Maybe 2 songs in, they'll start bobbing their heads. You might even get a foot tap or 2. They're hesitant. I find that 10 weeks is actually a realistic learning phase for these types of strategies. Maximize strategies, on the other hand, like maximize conversions and maximize conversion value with no optional targets applied, are more likely to get straight in there, wasted no time at all. If they're at the gig, they're going to jump straight in the crowd, start crowd surfing, have a great night. And I reckon, based on experience, about 7 days is what you'd need for these. So if you're completely changing your bidding strategy and you need to generate results faster than 10 weeks, then incorporate maximize strategies into your overall marketing strategy. So we are very nearly at our conclusion, but before I finish, there are certainly some things to be aware of with what I've spoken about today. You may have noticed that I haven't recommended the GA4 conversion event import feature that you can do when you link the 2 platforms together. And whilst the GA4 version is a lot more accurate than Universal Analytics' gold import, in which we'd see quite significant underreporting due to the way it attributes things, it still doesn't beat the dedicated Google Ads conversion tag. And I've seen Google themselves get a bit conflicted in their own messaging. One part of Google wants to push all of the great GA4 features you can use with Google Ads, whilst the more data-centric ones are saying, actually, no, dedicated conversion tags for Google Ads are the way to go. And I would back that up with my own experience. You may also argue that you don't actually look at Google Ads for conversion reporting. You use analytics to look at your whole marketing mix. But remember, it's not just you who's doing any learning. It's your machine learning systems as well. And if you reduce visibility, they're not going to be as smart as they could be if they had the full picture. Something that's going to be a bit of a game changer, I think, is custom variables for conversion. So you could be able to pull in variables that you set tailored to your business direct into the Google Ads conversion tag. At the moment, you can do this if you use GTag for reporting purposes, and I've been assured by our Google rep that it is coming to Google Tag Manager very soon. My Mystic Mike prediction is that this too is going to become a smart bidding factor, and when you think of the potential there, it could be a really gorgeous new source of learning for your machine learning dogs. And we've covered lifetime value audiences earlier in the presentation, of course, and it being a significant benefit of linking GA4 with Google Ads. But quite quietly, Google Ads have added a lifetime value dedicated field along with the new customer acquisition bidding options that they introduced earlier this year. And of course, if you do have, like my example with Shopify, a source of lifetime value outside of GA4, you can provide this direct to Google Ads, which might be better or even bolster the information being passed from GA4. Something to be aware of as well is when you're using these custom dimensions and metrics in an exploration is that things can go quite wonky if you don't pay attention. In my profit example earlier, I was getting the correct information when I did one exploration, but when I added certain dimensions, it would go quite wonky. And even when I refreshed the page, all the numbers would change. So at first I thought maybe it was a reporting delay, but actually I think it's sampling. So if you're going to be making any hard, solid decisions based on data such as this, make sure that it is the right data and you're seeing the accurate picture, if you like, or the most accurate picture available. Even though it's GA4, if you're importing audiences from GA4 to Google Ads, they are still going to be subject to the same minimum audience sizes as the Google Ads ones. So it's all very well using GA4 to get really niche with your targeting, but if there's only going to be 9 people every 30 days in that audience, it's too niche, sadly. So you're going to have to keep these numbers in mind depending on the activity that you're running. And speaking of audiences and targeting, if you want to explicitly target an audience, then you're going to have to use the targeting option. If you use observations audiences, even if you set a bid modifier, that's not going to influence the bidding at all when you're using smart bidding. At most, it's going to be used for attribution purposes, and at worst, it's going to use absolutely nothing. And I'm not definite on how the newer bidding strategies treat this, but I can safely say it's going to either be attribution only or nothing. Of course, it is handy to add all these audiences as observations, as it gives visibility to your smart bidding solutions. So add them as observations regardless, but if you want to target, then you'll have to create a new ad group or campaign with a targeting audience specifically for that marketing goal. And just to make matters around audiences more confusing, Google have decided they're going to change all the language around the audiences and audience types, which I wanted to get a nice, easy reference guide for you today. But the more I look at it, the more I discuss it with the team, the more confused I get. It's giving me a bit of a headache. So apologies, I did not get to the bottom of that. But Google have released guides, again, just as confusing as looking at it yourself. Good luck, basically. And also in sad news, similar audiences, which have been a valuable source of prospecting and getting new users to come and convert, is being retired. And they haven't said how that is going to be replaced. And it's certainly not going to be Flock anymore, sadly. So I think this, amongst lots of other things I've talked about today, highlights just how complex paid media roles have become. And what will they be like in the future? Will it be a bright future where we continue to care for our dogs? Or will it be a dystopian future, entirely controlled by machines? And if that is the case, I bet you'll wish that you treated your dogs better. And I realized I nearly went an entire presentation about machine learning without mentioning sentient AI. I failed you, and you may now help me with the tomatoes. So anyway, if you've got a bit of a hot brain, I mean, I know I have, and I made the presentation, so I don't know how you're feeling. But just to go over the key takeaways again, make sure you nurture and continue to nurture your smart bidding solutions. And remember that I don't think there's a situation where great data equals great results does not apply. So make sure that's at the heart of what you do. Also, it's all very well these granular and complicated features, but remember your KPIs. Of course, you have a target to hit, you have marketing goals to drive. All very well getting really lost in the technicals, but always tie it to what you are trying to achieve. And then, with experience, the results will come faster.